I had a discussion with John, and I mentioned that incident to him, the powder incident. And that was on the Saturday, so we were back in on the Sunday, and I asked him, I said, hey, if I bring some of this to you, can you, maybe get it checked out? So I did. I wish I didn't give him as much as I had, because I only got a tiny bit left, but so he did take it to, a contact of his to do analysis. Sadly, the guy didn't even do the real analysis on it because he knew exactly what it was as soon as he saw it. He goes, I know what that stuff is. He was pissed off too that proper protocol wasn't followed through with filling out paperwork and stuff, right? Like, I had no idea about that. He gave me forms and stuff after the fact, but this guy was pissed, and he said, don't ever come back here again, basically, right? He told me a couple other things about that guy. It's like, I don't want to mess with that guy. But so what he said was, it's one of three things. And the first one was they found this residue after a massive rocket launch, or it's been found with UFOs taking off or landing. They've found this same residue. And then the third thing, he goes, and this is kind of more recent that this has been happening, that it's been found with portals.
Every damn time I try to take a nice quiet hike, there's always some human around to harsh my mellow. But that's all right. It's February, and that means it's Sasquatch season. This month, Through a Glass, Darkly will be going deep on all things Sasquatch. So sit down, tiny human, and watch. Otherwise, I will eat you.
I love Sasquatch season. You're not going to want to miss it all this month on Through a Glass Darkly.
Welcome back. I'm here with Mike Patterson. Mike, welcome back.
Thanks, Sean. Appreciate it.
All right. So in the last episode, we talked about these two researchers who kind of were cautioning you to slow down. You're going too fast. Why were they doing that? What were they afraid of?
I wouldn't even call them researchers. Like John Bindernagel was a wildlife biologist. Spent over 40 years, Canadian wildlife biologist. He was actually out of Ontario here, and he moved out to BC because of this subject, right? So he had spent decades trying to have them recognized. And it was the same with Dmitry, who was, I think he was the science director or something of the Darwin State Museum in Moscow. And he'd been involved since 1964. And when I was talking about their abilities, first of all, like, I met John at one point. He came out to Ontario, visited with a few researchers. And I didn't get into this as a researcher. I had an experience, and I just wanted answers. I'm just some guy looking for truth, right? 17 years later, call me what you want, a researcher, or, I'm just a guy looking for truth, looking for answers, no bullshit, tells it like it is, zero embellishment, right? So John had come out here at one point, and I took him out to the location where I had my first close vocal encounter. And I didn't know what I was dealing with at that point. I had no idea about their abilities at that point, right? I'd spent about 4 years in this region after having that first close vocal encounter that put me on this journey. But so I took him around this area, him and his wife, Joan, showing them structures, man-made looking structures, or, human-made looking, that are consistent with Sasquatch presence. And I just basically showed him these things that I found throughout the area, not making any conclusions. And he respected how I approached this at that time. I was very level-headed. Here's this what I found. Here's this what I found. Not saying, oh, Sasquatch made this. I wasn't like that at all, right? Till it gets to a certain point where you know what you're doing, and you got their presence, and you know how they show up and how they interact with humans and that. So both John and Dimitri, Dimitri was actually a student of, I think his name was Boris Porshnev, who was the founder of Hominology. And Dimitri basically took over that, trying to have that Hominology basically changed, or have anthropology changed to Hominology as a new discipline of anthropology, which would have the Sasquatch recognized as people. Sadly, that didn't happen by the time he passed in that. And in my time, my experiences started growing, and I started learning about their abilities and that, and I'm putting this stuff out public. And, I'm dealing with both of these gentlemen at the same time, sending them supporting evidence, vocalizations, cast copy. I gave each of them a cast copy that I had, that I'd made a mold from, really good one that I did from snow, basically, right, over the years. Well, back in 2013, that one anyways. And, so I'm sending them supporting evidence and interacting with them, having discussions through email. I had one chat on the phone with Dimitri, from Moscow at the time. He was in his 90s, right? And so he's trying to get done what he can get done, because any day he can go. And they both had other science, Jeff Meldrum, at the time, trying to dissuade them from taking me seriously. I dealt with Meldrum. He's passed on now too. I did not have any respect for him because I dealt with him personally, right? So he was very dismissive of anything I put in front of him. There was actually a television program that was put on where it was John Bindernagel, Meldrum, and Les Stroud. And the whole premise of the show was about hoaxed prints, hoaxed casts, hoax foot casts, and that they had a table in front of them with all these foot casts. So it's like, okay, which one do you want to check? And Les points to the one I gave him. It's like, oh, I think they were hoping to find that it was, no, they can prove that there's some dubious stuff going on here. And so they laser scanned it. And like I said, this is the whole premise of the show, to expose hoax prints. And they left the result hanging after that. Although we had a email or a phone message afterwards with Les, Dwayne had said something to him to the effect of, what'd they say? Hoax, right? And Les had said, no, real deal. But they couldn't say that on television, because if they did, suddenly, Mike's, evidence is authentic, and all the other crazy stuff he's been saying. Now what do we do? But they said nothing. Nope, we're not saying anything, right? So I've been up against a wall of denial from the side of science, well-named researchers involved in this subject. Back in 2013, people were not talking about their interdimensional aspect. I think if anybody was experiencing that stuff, which I'm sure there was, they had to be, they were not talking about it for fear of ridicule, for fear of losing face, for whatever, fear, right? No, I can't talk about that openly. I'm just going to get it, shut down. So nobody had the balls. I did. So I started speaking about that stuff, and I stood firm, and I have since day one. And this subject has now evolved to a point where it's widely accepted. There's all kinds of people speaking up now about their experiences with their interdimensional nature, the invisibility, the cloaking, the telepathy, the mind-speak, the apports, the orb activity, the single prints. It's all out in the open now. And, I know what I'm interacting with Neff, he's had a big part in helping push this subject forward, right? So when John and Dimitri were trying to tell me to tone it down, that, hey, we got to have them discovered first, I was like, I'm sorry that I'll be 6 feet under by the time you guys catch up. So no, I'm like, let's give it all, let them sort it out after the fact, right? And it's funny, there's a thing on the Skinwalker Ranch, there's George Knapp, way back, he did a presentation, and I remember him saying basically the same thing at one point when he talked a story about these two physicists, I think they were, and they had this incident with this dark black cloud that shows up and comes out over top of them and stops. And suddenly one of the physicists, a voice comes out of him that was not his. It was basically, call it a possession or whatever you want. This vocal come out of him saying, we're watching you. And the guy had no knowledge of that happening. He felt, I think, sick or something after the fact for a few days. I can't remember the whole details, but it was afterwards George Knapp had said, this stuff's crazy. Let's just give it all to them and let them sort it out after the fact. Same thing, right? So that was my thing to John and Dimitri was, sorry, I'm not changing. I'm not going to suppress my experience and my knowledge to appease science, basically, right? It's like, no, I'm telling it like it is. And that's what I've done since day one. And I think they respected that as I respected them, I think they respected my journey as well. So.
To advertise on Through a Glass Darkly, email throughaglassdarkly@gmail.com.
Well, I mean, increasingly, everything that we've been told about just about everything's been a lie at this point. Yeah. So I'm fully in support of just putting it out there. Like, there's no reason it should go through a filter at all, because these people have filtered everything and twisted everything that they don't have any credibility anymore. So I think even if they came out and said exactly what you're saying, nobody would believe them, because they've lied literally about everything, right? So
yeah, that's where I'm at. Basically this entire system, everything we've been taught, to me, is looking like lies. And the one thing with the Sasquatch too, what I'm involved in with Neff's family, I've developed written communication. So I get to ask questions. I don't get all my questions answered. I have all kinds that haven't been answered, but I've gotten some pretty incredible insight into, controversial questions, conspiracy related. People get their backs up when, that's a conspiracy question. I don't care what you think. I'm still going to ask it if I can get an answer,
Yeah, basically every conspiracy that was conspiracy has been proven to be, not
exactly.
Every, proven to be real. Most of them have, right?
So,
I mean, take the lab leak thesis, right? You were racist to believe that, but you weren't racist if you thought the savages in the wet market were eating, penguins that ate bats. So, everything is so what kind of controversial questions have you asked that, let's not talk about the pandemic, because, YouTube likes to take down videos.
They are well aware of that. They know what's going on. They know what's going on more than we do, right? They are the key to understanding our true history, and everything that's been suppressed from us. They seem to have the answers. I've asked them about weather manipulation. They've confirmed that. Oh yeah,
100%. Like, we have Fleet Week in San Francisco every year, and the sky is always perfectly clear. Yeah, the Air Force has been able to seed the cloud seeding, I think they call it, where they can just clear up the air so it's a nice, beautiful day. So even at worst, right, or at best, they can change local weather patterns. Like, that's well established. Now the question is like other things, I don't know. But anyway, what else? I didn't mean to interrupt you again.
And it's not just making it rain. We're talking tornadoes and stuff, right? Like, I've asked them that. They've confirmed that they are utilizing weather manipulation to harm us purposely, right? So I've asked them, are they trying to...
To what end, though? To what end? Why are they trying to... Why the powers that be trying to harm?
Are they trying to kill us all? And they wrote same as us, meaning, yes, they're trying to wipe them out too, right? This is why they hide, stay hidden for the most part, when they show up. I think this also, might be, I've gotten drawings over the years too that have shown us. One particular drawing was kind of this showing like an Earth-like thing connecting to another one. And then this devil's face with horns up at the top of the page that had a sad look on, not a happy look on its face, right? And it took us some time to figure it out, but I finally did. We're sitting in the kitchen at Dwayne's cottage one day. I go, it's like a demon, whatever, that can't get to them, so that they are safe where they hide. Boom, marble comes out of thin air. Confirmation. It's like, you got it, right? And that happens sometimes with us. Things are confirmed with, our discussions with suddenly we say something and a marble, bang, comes out, a thin air in confirmation with that sort of thing. I've asked them about the moon landing. They wrote, no, never left. I asked a more recent one on the way I worded it. I said, did the Egyptians, I can't remember the question I asked, but it was about the Egyptians building the pyramids. And they wrote no. And the way I wrote the question, I thought, if I cut out that very first word, it basically shows that the Egyptians did not build the pyramids, And then I listened to some stuff on that, and, relates to the Anunnaki. And they've stated the Anunnaki created the human race, and that Sasquatch have a different creator, which I don't know who or what that is yet. I've gotten, the Anunnaki created humans, right? So I know that from what they say, some humans have Sasquatch DNA. I don't know what percentage of that, no idea. And I say some because I don't. I've asked them. They've said something else about me, but I don't want to get into that yet. But I think what's happened is the Anunnaki came down, took them, manipulated their DNA, and created humans. This is what it's looking like to me. They say the Sasquatch say they're the first people. They are the first indigenous people of Earth, still alive. And there is whatever source has tried to wipe them out, which is why they, for the most part, stay hidden. Plus, they just, the reaction humans have to them that scares the shit out of most people, basically, right? So they, choose to stay hidden. I think there's technology being used to try and seek them out, maybe whatever scalar technology to try and take them out. I know that they've mentioned about military hunting them. There's been quite a few questions over the years. I'd have to dig through my pages, my drawings and that. I've gotten dozens of drawings from them. It's crazy.
Have they opined on kind of what's going on now? Like just the craziness globally? I mean, look, it seems like it's all orchestrated to depopulate, but, what do I know?
It is. I'd bet the farm on that. I'd wage my life on that. That's how sure I am of that. They'd basically written it in stone, right? The Georgia Guidestones, and then they blew that up, right? Literally written in stone, down to 500 million, and let's maintain that. Control everything, basically, right? I was shown back in 2013 with an incident. I'll say it was a vision they gave me from probably their collective, and I was awake when it happened. And it showed me them with the words, soon your people will know. My clear understanding of that experience was that they are in the midst of a reveal of their people. This is not a discovery. This is maintain a narrative, basically, right? So I think Meldrum was basically given that position to keep it at a certain level. Let's not take it any further, completely deny of any abilities or anything, and then splash his face all over television, and every program as some Bigfoot expert, which you don't know anything really until you have ongoing contact. And, this is where people like myself that are out in the field, there's, many people at this point, I think that's a growing number anyways, that are given ongoing contact experience, that are exposing their abilities and their existence. And the Sasquatch are reaching out to whoever, select people being shown their existence. And, and this is growing, the numbers are growing. And it's all in alignment with what I was shown back in 2013, that they are revealing their existence. And they haven't told me, but my thought is because they know what's going on in this world. They want humans to wake up. And I've had Neff more recently confirm that we got to stand up together. This is basically the way out of it. For humans to stand together, there's billions of us. There's only a handful of them in comparison, really, right? So, and this is why there's all the division tactics, divide and conquer, right? Keep us at each other's throats and instead of coming together, because once we come together, the system falls, it breaks, And this is why I do this. I can't stand this system. I think it's just one big heap stinking pile of bullshit.
It's slavery. It's slavery.
Manipulation, corruption. It's pure evil, when you get into the layers of it. But I do this to do my part anyways, to break it. I want it done with. I want this broken. We need some social engineers to create a new one, one that is a real democracy, that works for the people, right? Because right now it's all complete opposite of what it's supposed to be. So.
Did they ever say who or what is in charge of this system?
They are of very few words. So I've never had a conversation with them. They've shown me that they've heard me telepathically on several occasions where I've reached out telepathically, and it's not instant. I don't get a response right away, but maybe later on that day or that night, they show up. They like that time too, when you're just waking up, just before you wake up, that theta stage, right? When your mind's still in that subconscious, but you're right at that moment of waking up, and they might, show you something, or the clarity is undeniable when they do something like that, right? It's like, I've had them the first time back in 2013, I'm asleep on the couch at home, and they grunted in my head. That was the very first time I got, a telepathic mind-speak thing, right? And it was a grunt. It was so loud. I was asleep. I shot to my feet instantly, and I was on the phone to the property owner. It's like, holy shit, you wouldn't believe what just happened, right? I've had back at the cabin that I was talking about where we had the UFO incident, that first visit in the morning, I was sleeping in my tent all night. It got kind of cold in the morning, so I went and crashed in the couch in the cabin early in the morning. And then I got woken up with a telepathic, like a young male voice going, whoa, and my eyes just boom, right open, right? Because it's like he's right there in your face. The clarity is just incredible, right? So I forget where I was going with this, but they know what's going on this earth a hell of a lot more than we do. There are no secrets with them. So the demonic side cannot hide their plans, basically. Sasquatch know what's going on with CERN. They are so aware of what's going on behind closed doors in this world with the dark side. This is why they're a major threat, if you want to call it that, right?
But what did they say about CERN?
I asked them at one point, did they use CERN to unleash, I used the term Satan, and they said yes, but I would say probably more of a, unleash demonic activity, right? And if you look into where that's actually located in Switzerland, apparently that specific location has something to do with, the demonic realm, basically, right? So, yeah, it's being used for nefarious purpose, right? I don't know to what extent, if they're changing timelines or, creating, I don't know. I don't know what they're doing, but.
What other kind of revelations have they provided you with that were, I guess, mind-blowing or surprising or notable that you think are worth mentioning?
Offhand, nothing's really coming right to mind offhand. I did just remember something. I had a little vial up there. This is kind of off topic, but not off topic, but just something else that happened more recently, last year, I guess, last winter. So back in 2013, Dwayne and I were sitting outside, and this is in the early days, but, we're growing comfortable with this. Or I don't know if they gave us a comfort without us understanding what was going on at the time, but we're sitting in chairs in the dark, and suddenly it's dark out. I see this smoky substance right here in front of my face. And then suddenly my face is covered by a hairy hand, I figured, right? Very firm, and just few seconds, then let go. And there was no fear. And I told Dwayne, I said, what just happened? And I described it as darker than dark, that smoky looking substance, right? And he's like, what do you mean darker than dark? And then it happened to him. I remember he said he got caught with his mouth open, so mouth full of hair, basically. But he saw it too, and then he understood what I was talking about. So fast forward to last year, last winter, we're sitting at the kitchen table. I got a fridge right behind me, and we're talking about that incident. We're just kind of revisiting that and mention that dark, smoky substance. And then Dwayne gets up, to just go to the fridge, grab a beer out of the fridge. And he looks down on the floor, and there's, kind of in a circular pattern, there's this black, charcoaly kind of dust on the floor spread. It's like, what the hell is that? Where'd that come from? That wasn't there, And we scooped it up. Well, I was almost going to throw it out in the garbage. And I was like, wait a sec, let's put this in a bag and maybe I can get it analyzed at some point. It was like a little granular, but not. It was kind of powdery. And it didn't leave any mark on, when I rubbed it in my fingers. So I found out after the fact that I did a presentation at the Native Center in Toronto last year. And one of the speakers was John D'Souza, who's former FBI. So at one point,
yeah, he's the one. Has a book. I think it's Interdimensionals or something like that. Like that's where he is on this topic. At least it sounds like.
Yeah, he's exposing this stuff too, right? So I had a discussion with John, and I mentioned that incident to him, the powder incident, and that was on the Saturday. So we were back in on the Sunday, and I asked him. I said, "Hey, if I bring some of this to you, can you?" maybe get it checked out. So I did. I wish I didn't give him as much as I had because I only got a tiny bit left. But so he did take it to, a contact of his to do analysis. Sadly, the guy didn't even do the real analysis on it because he knew exactly what it was as soon as he saw it. He goes, I know what that stuff is. He was pissed off too that proper protocol wasn't followed through with filling out paperwork and stuff, right? Like I had no idea about that. He gave me forms and stuff after the fact, but this guy was pissed and he said, don't ever come back here again, basically, right? He told me a couple other things about that guy. It's like, I don't want to mess with that guy. But so what he said was it's one of three things. And the first one was they found this residue after a massive rocket launch, or it's been found with UFOs taking off or landing. They've found this same residue. And then the third thing, he goes, and this is kind of more recent that this has been happening, that it's been found with portals opening and closing. So basically, that's obviously the answer to, out of the three things that happen inside the cottage, what we're dealing with, this is interdimensional stuff. So basically, I collected this black powder residue from a portal that had opened and closed. We didn't see it happen, but, there's the physical result of it. I hope at some point I can get it analyzed, what I got left. But I've reached out to a few members out of the university that I never got a response back. But, it's hard to reach out to somebody and discuss something that is of an interdimensional nature and word it properly without them, thinking you're just some crackpot, right? So,
well, just put yourself in their position. Even if you were just saying some random person or citizen says, hey, I have this substance. Can you analyze it and let me know what it is? Right? For all I know, it's anthrax, right? Like, who knows, right? So even if you take the interdimensional part out of it, they're not going to be willing to just accept some unknown substance from some random person and analyze it, right?
There was another aspect of that, which is why the guy threw it in the garbage instead of returning it. It had a level of radiation to it that wasn't, he said it was very, very low. So it wasn't anything to be concerned about. But, I even held some of this stuff in my hand, but, he gave the numbers of that level of radiation. I looked that up and it's like, it's cool. I'll be fine.
What was it in, like millirads or something like that? Or sieverts?
What? Say it again.
What amount of radiation? Because I think they measured it in like millirads or sieverts or something.
I don't remember. I have it in an email, but because, that's not something I typically deal with at all. In fact, that was the very first time I've dealt with that. So, I don't really have the schooling on, understanding that, except that I just took those numbers, put them into the computer basically and got my results from that. Right. And it was like, well within the range of safe.
Like what you would get from like an x-ray, like not safe, but like you can sustain it, as long as you're not getting an x-ray every day, it's not bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Crazy stuff, and I don't think there's been anybody else that has collected a residue from a portal involved in the subject of Sasquatch. I've seen nothing anyways posted online, right? I made a video about that on my channel.
Do you still have some of this stuff?
Very little, almost. I hope it's enough for some analysis. I do think it's probably enough for that. Maybe one day I can, get that checked out.
And then what other types of evidence have you collected? You said you have like evidence of footprints, like a ton of audio recordings. They've also kind of answered your questions. So what about like a written language or anything like that? I think you had alluded to that a little bit.
Some of the writings I've gotten have shown, not any long sentences or anything, but have shown a language. They wrote down a specific language that they speak there. And they even wrote that, speak here, with an arrow. And it looked like it was spelt like GLEPTINO. That's what it looked like on the chalkboard. And then I was saying it out loud and, we go outside, we come back in and they'd changed it up a bit to try and help me pronounce it properly, right? I put this into the computer. I didn't get anything come up. So maybe it's, there's likely another word for it that might date back into antiquity, right? So, and then there's the drawings that I've asked about invisibility, and we can do that. I know we can do that. They don't give the answers like, yeah, here you go. It's like I've spent years trying to figure this out. And they've given these like dots and dashes. And, I'm starting to wonder if perhaps that's a language in itself, but I don't know. It looks like maybe an equation of some sort or a language. And the 3 dots in a triangle, really significant. So these keep coming up with them. They keep showing 3 dots in a triangle. And it's funny, Stephen Greer uses that in his website. And it's funny that at one point, it wasn't that long ago, I just had this thought, I'm going to go back into this old movie Stargate and just give it another watch and see if there's anything in there. And it was funny that I would have that thought. And I think it's from the early 90s. So they get through this Stargate, this military, and they end up on this planet with these Egyptian types. And to get back, to go through that Stargate, there's a missing symbol that they need. And when they do find it, it's funny that that symbol is the exact same symbol that the Sasquatch keep showing me. So I don't know how it relates or how it's utilized, but I know it's significant.
What do you think the people are? I mean, do you think this is their technology, or do you think they've kind of stayed in this low-tech kind of existence? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you mean the Sasquatch?
Yeah.
From what they say, they're the first people, right? So they are built for the earth. They love the earth. They love the trees and the flowers. And, those were two of the first words that Neff would just ecstatic about hearing. And he would say those with glee. And, he was just so thrilled to hear those words. So they really love the earth and nature. And they just have an understanding of energy and consciousness that allows them to travel seemingly anywhere. I think what it seems, just with consciousness, with the thought, as how it, how they do that, I have no idea, but they don't need any vehicles to locate or relocate somewhere very quickly. They can move like nothing, we've ever experienced, right? There's so much at this point, like Dwayne and myself have experienced, but it just brings up more questions, right? The more you know, the less you know, it seems, basically, in one sense, right? Even though, hey, I've been able to answer some of the big questions that, about the whole existence of Sasquatch that have come out over the years, and that, I have some of those answers that I know are fact, from experience after experience. The smells, people say, oh, they smell, they stink. No, they don't. They create those, and they create different smells, and they can recreate smells, and they turn them off and on like a light switch, and they can direct them to an individual in a group setting. I remember we got one of the young guys in the family. His name's Ninyanin. He's a young teenager, and he was actually witnessed sitting on the couch at one point when he was about the size of a 4-year-old. Dwayne said his eyes are like piercing green and his feet didn't touch the floor. Well, now I think he's about probably closer to 7 feet tall, and he likes to mess with us. He can be annoying at times. I'm sitting at the kitchen table at one point, and I get literally the smell of shit, dog shit, a whirlwind, like a little mini tornado put right up my nostril. And Dwayne's sitting right there. He smells nothing. And then, he gives him the smell too, right? We've had pleasant smells, beautiful smells. And then we've had some, shite and sulfur and, sheep manure or whatever, farm. They love to play with us, right? But these things too, it's like taking one for the team. It gives us the experience to learn and understand about their abilities and what they're capable of. So, they can be right beside you and you would not know it unless they wanted you to know. They can cloak, so complete invisibility, move through walls, go anywhere, to complete flesh and blood, fully manifested, and I think everything in between. And to me, the only thing that makes sense, they have complete control over manipulating their internal frequency, right? So when it comes to us being able to do something like that, I don't think they're using technology. I think it's inherent quality that they can just do naturally.
I mean, we might have that ability too, but it's all suppressed. And I think that's part of the rub. I think that's part of the reason there's so much suppression of everything, is because people don't want us to, or those in power don't want us to realize what we can do, because then they won't have willing slaves anymore.
And, also with that, with what you're saying there, the fact that they're coming at us so hard, obviously we're powerful and they know it and they fear that. So they've done everything they can to keep us dumbed down. So they do not want us to wake up and turn on, basically, right?
Yeah, whatever that means, right? I mean,
develop our skills.
Yeah.
I've had incidents throughout my life of, telepathy happens periodically. I remember I had this incident way back. I was working with this is like right when the internet was just starting. And I was working in this warehouse for, satellite tracking industry for the trucking industry. And I had this girl I was working with, Helen, and I remember she asked me how to use something with Microsoft Word. And I told her, I said, just give me a sentence, any sentence. And of all things, she said, suddenly I hear in my head, clear as day, the dog went to the store. I'll never forget that. 2-3 seconds later, she says, the dog went to the store. I was just like, my mind just, like, holy shit, I just heard what you said before you said it. So, things like that have happened periodically throughout my life, right?
Yeah, with me, it's precognition, like just precognitive dreams. Not many, but I just document them. I just write them down, and then a few weeks later they'll happen, or a few months later they'll happen. And they're not like super precise, but they're precise enough. Like there's going to be a labor strike in Missoula, Montana, right? Which is pretty specific. And then I would see like uniform colors and things like that. So I just write it down, and then 9 months later, there's a, Starbucks and the Amazon strike in Missoula, Montana. So, they're not practical. They're not useful for me in any way, but, they happen from time to time. Particularly if you examine this topic, as you said with Nietzsche, right? If you gaze into the abyss gazes back.
You brought one up, as you were mentioning that back when 9/11 happened. It wasn't long after, it might have been a few weeks, there was a plane, I think it was a plane blow up, I think it was over Queens or something, and it was forgotten about pretty quick. But I saw that. I had a premonition dream about that before that happened. I can't remember how long. It might have been, I think it might have been a few weeks. I don't remember when that happened, but I saw a pipe bomb in my dream. And I woke up. It's like, holy shit, this is, I knew it was going to happen. This. And then sure, like I remember in this dream, I'm standing on this front lawn and this massive engine part drops down beside me. And it was over a residential neighborhood. And, I was basically among this. And I woke up with this knowing that this was going to happen. And then when it did, I was like, holy shit, that's my dream. Right. And so, yeah, these things happen.
And in fact, the more you document them, the more you write them down, the more likely they'll come. It's like a muscle that you have to train. So anyway, any final words for the audience?
Well, I have my YouTube channel, Sasquatch Ontario. I have such a incredible library of Sasquatch vocalizations documented over the years from Nest Family. They've given this, right? And prints that are, some of the footage it's amazing, right? You can tell it's like, that's made by something that is extremely heavy. And I have a lot of supporting evidence and a lot of experience. It's one of the most advanced channels on the subject. So, visit that and subscribe to my channel. And, I would appreciate that. And, like I said, keep an open mind. This is not a subject in itself. There's a whole connection with the UFO stuff and all this other cryptid stuff going on. It's all related to a greater understanding of our reality. So, I'm happy to see we're finally evolving and getting somewhere with this stuff, and a lot more people really being open to it. So,
and I'll put the link below so that people can find your channel pretty easily. So thank you, Mike. It's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you for sharing your time on your Sunday with me.
All right. My pleasure. Thanks.
If you enjoyed today's video, please hit like and subscribe, and also hit the notification button so you can be notified whenever I post new content. Thank you. Now, if you're enjoying the channel and you want to support it, there are several things you can do. In fact, there are 5 things you can do. The first thing you can do is just buy my books. I got plenty of books out in the market right now, and I would prefer that folks buy a book rather than giving me direct support, because they get something out of it. They get a real tangible product. The second way you can support me is by becoming a member on YouTube or becoming a patron on Patreon. And just go to either site and it'll explain everything. The third way you can support the channel is by checking out my merch site, which is here. There's plenty of stuff that you can get to support the channel. And I'd appreciate that you have it and you can wear it. Not only do you help support the channel, but you also help promote the channel, and I appreciate that. The fourth way that you can support the channel, and this is really easy, is anytime you want to buy something on Amazon, literally just go to the description below and click on any link, literally any link. The channel gets a cut of that, and it costs you no extra money. You just go through the link, as I'm part of the Amazon Affiliates Club. The fifth and final way you can support the channel is through donations. Now, I don't prefer these because it's more of an expression of gratitude, but you don't really get anything out of it as a subscriber to the channel. However, if you decide to do these options, there's 2 options. There's Buy Me a Coffee, which is a separate site, and there's also, you can go through YouTube with either a super chat, super sticker, or a super thanks. Again, I prefer Buy Me a Coffee because that organization takes less money than Amazon does. But either way, I appreciate any support you are willing to give the channel. So thank you very much, and keep watching. I really appreciate it.